Hi again, everyone. Today is day 6 of World FTD Awareness Week. All week, I've been sharing interviews on different aspects of the FTD journey and highlighting actions you can take to help advance a future free of FTD. The theme for today is educate, focused on getting information about FTD in the hands of health professionals who need it. I'm honored to welcome New York State Senator Michelle Hinchey from the state's 41st District. If you're driving on Route 87, think Hudson, Kingston, New Paltz, and Poughkeepsie, and both points west and east. As she'll tell us, Michelle has a personal connection to FTD. She'll share her story and speak not only to the value of educating health providers, but to the need for awareness and advocacy in the changing reality to benefit families facing FTD across the country. Hi, Senator Hinchey. Welcome. I know you have a busy calendar, so I truly appreciate you taking the time to be here today. But I also know how important FTD is to you on a personal level.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for doing this as well. Raising awareness around FTD is crucial. It's the only way that we're both going to be able to ever find a cure, but it's also so important to give people both the community and the understanding of what this is. That was our biggest challenge in our family. My father was diagnosed with FTD, but we, just like almost everybody else, went through years of misdiagnoses and confusion. And when we finally understood what it was and we were able to find community and we were able to really get ourselves prepared and do research, it was so helpful. And so things like this, all of the communications, the awareness, the pushes, the videos, all of it, it's really life-changing it will be life-changing for a lot of people. And it's important that we do the work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like if we don't raise our voices, then, how can we be heard? How can change be made? And that is exactly what I'm looking for and I hope for. So I have some questions for you. Can you tell us about your dad, U.S. Representative Maurice Hinchey? What impact did he have on his constituents? And what does it mean for you to follow in his footsteps?
Thank you. My dad was truly the American story. He moved from the West Village tenements when he was 9 years old with his family to Saugerties, which is where I live, in Ulster County, New York, and grew up. He had no shoes in the summer. But in his spare time as a kid would read the dictionary for fun and, got into politics, ran for office after actually being a toll booth collector, working his way through college. He ran for the New York State Assembly and was there for 20 years. And in his time in the assembly, he actually gained the title and the reputation as the environmental conscience of New York State, given to him by then Governor Mario Cuomo, for his work really leading on the environment back in the 70s and the 80s. I'll say before it was cool, right? Really kind of helping spur that environmental movement. And then he ran for Congress and served in the U.S. House of Representatives for another 18 years and did a profound amount of work for labor, for people, really keeping people at the center of everything that he did, the legislation they worked on, and the movements that they created. And it showed me firsthand the kinds of impacts that you can have when you do the work, you bring the right people together, you put your shoulder to the wheel, and you fight for your community. I saw all of the incredible things that he was able to do. And I also learned, one of my favorite stories is we'd go back to school shopping and a trip that should maybe take an hour would take us 3 to 4 hours because everyone would stop and talk with him and he would always stop. And I heard everything as a kid from, please help me, I can't get my veterans benefits, to thank you so much, you helped my mother be able to stay in her home. And that shaped for me the way the world works, really how the world should work. And that's to help people. So he passed away in 2017. And I was actually looking just before that at how I could get involved, how I could give back and help my community, the community that raised me. And then he got sick. And, I stayed on working in the private sector to help my mom, who became his primary caregiver, and to also be able to spend the time with him. But after he passed in 2017, I knew that picking up that mantle and doing the work and elevating the needs of our community, both is what I needed to do personally, but also to continue the work that he dedicated really his entire life to be able to continue to give our community a voice at the table was important. And I'm really proud that in 2020 we ran and we won our spot in the New York State Senate, and we're still here today. Again, both picking up that legacy, picking up the mantle, but raising awareness too for really important issues like FTD that are often overlooked.
Yeah, you are really bringing it to the forefront, which I am so appreciative of. Can you please share with us about your family's FTD story and your passion for FTD advocacy, for the awareness, the education, the support, the research?
My father was diagnosed with cancer, actually colon cancer. And he went through really aggressive chemo and radiation while still working. And there's something called chemo brain, which, often people get after cancer. Is a little bit of confusion, sometimes the wrong words. And right after he made it through, right after he cleared all of his cancer treatments, we started recognizing some changes in his language. We'd be at dinner and he would say, "Pass the spoon," instead of "pass the salt," right? Two S words on the table related to the meal, but not the intention. And that got progressively worse as time went on, and pretty quickly, quite frankly. Not remembering places. He was such an orator. He was an incredible speaker. His mind was his gift. Many people would say his hair was his gift, but really his mind was his gift. He was so intelligent. And the memory was a history buff. He could recall anything. He knew everything about our community and different parts of the world, the way the world should work, the vision he had. And it was getting harder for him to communicate. And we started looking into with him what this could be. And it's hard, especially for him. Men of a certain generation often don't like going to the doctor proactively. And so that in and of itself was a battle. PSA, everyone, please go get your physicals, go to your doctor. It's so important. Really, my mom was able to get him finally to the doctor and to a neurologist. And after a handful of misdiagnoses and confusion, people thinking it was Alzheimer's, people thinking it was still remnants from the chemo, others just thinking age, we finally got the diagnosis of FTD. And it just made so much more sense. He had FTD with primary progressive aphasia, which is word loss, and Parkinsonian syndrome. So he started also experiencing tremors, and by the end, some loss of use of his legs. And, as you're kind of going through this disease, much of your body just starts to slowly shut down. And, it's heartbreaking, this disease, especially the language component, because you can't even read. Right? You can't watch TV because you can't hear it. You can't intake the language. You can't communicate. And so he knew who we were, and we could engage with smiles and handholds, but you lose a lot of it at that time. And, it was something that I hope in a future world, no one will ever have to experience. But it was really important to our family to share the diagnosis because it was so difficult for us. And because so few people know about it, everyone just always assumes Alzheimer's, and it's very different. They're both dementias, but it's very different. And so we made the decision, my mom and I, to go public with his diagnosis. We found the Association of Frontotemporal Degeneration, AFTD, who was a lifeline for us. We worked with them and we went public on that this is what he had. And it opened a whole community, both for people who didn't know and wanted to learn more because he was so beloved and he was part of people's families. People really felt that close and so passionately about him that more people became educated about it. And others came out of the woodwork saying, this sounds like what my family member had, or this is what we had. No one's ever talked about it before. And that's what we've really tried to carry into our sessions and into the legislative process. Me being in this position, as I've said, I have the opportunity to elevate a lot both of work and change the direction and consciousness for people as we're thinking about healthcare and these types of disorders. And so my first year in office in 2021, we knew that there was World FTD Awareness Week. I had done some work with AFTD on their promotion. And we looked around and said, why don't we talk about that at the state level? And we wrote the first ever resolution. I believe it was the first ever resolution to really highlight FTD World Awareness Week in the state of New York. And we've now done that every year since then. And I've had colleagues who talked about their parents' experience with dementia as Alzheimer's. And after we did the resolution, it came out that it was actually FTD.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe as you're talking and people are listening to symptoms and you're talking more about it, that people are like, wait, maybe it wasn't young onset Alzheimer's. Maybe it was FTD. It really sort of opens up that possibility.
Right. And even people who it was just easier to describe it as Alzheimer's for other people, right? I think when you have a family member diagnosed with FTD, you find yourself explaining it a lot. And that can be heavy. It's a big weight to carry. And sometimes you just don't want to have that conversation over and over again. And yet we have to. But so oftentimes a lot of people just for self-preservation will say dementia, someone will say Alzheimer's, and you won't correct it. Right. And it just becomes easier to say that because people get it instinctively. And I think what I've seen is people actually now wanting to be more transparent about saying specifically that it's FTD, which is what we have to do. That's the reason why we did the resolution. It's the reason why we talk about it and why we shared the diagnosis is because we have to socialize what this is so that we can get more resources, so that we can get more attention to this debilitating disease to actually get some answers.
Yeah, I didn't even know that there was a World FTD Awareness Week. I guess how would I know? We're sort of new within this world of FTD. But I had seen it when it popped up about this resolution that you had done. And I thought for some reason, this was the first time World FTD Awareness Week was like happening. But, again, it's because of you that, it sort of put this light bulb in my head of like, okay, how can I get involved in World FTD Awareness Week? What can I do? And this is such a horrific disease, and it doesn't matter who you are. There's just not enough resources out there to help and to navigate, to help others navigate. So, and myself to navigate. And, I'm just sort of learning as I go. But you and your family are so gracious to be able, and even just now to be able to tell your story is really moving. And I truly appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I'll add, we have our awareness week as the resolution, but there's so much more to be done. And we're actually working on legislation right now that we'll be introducing for next year, which would create, I believe, the first ever FTD registry of diagnoses across New York State, because we have to start getting accurate data. We need accurate numbers and to be able to see it, and especially for our Department of Health, to be able to understand the scope, because we all just find each other in this community because we have to. But we need to be able to show really the scope and the breadth and the need that's out there. We need the concrete data. So we are proposing that we create, through the Department of Health here in New York, the first ever registry. We want to create in that legislation as well an advisory board created of doctors, physicians, people with FTD, caregivers of those with FTD, and every other stakeholder that should be at the table to start to really have a central conversation on what we have to do here. We also, on that registry, it would be public, not obviously private information, but just the numbers. What we're seeing, and then also collect the information for both programs that are available for help locally across the state, and different types of treatments when we get there, or what we're learning. I mean, the research is changing by the day. So we would hope to update that regularly. That's the direction, is to update that regularly with treatments, with solutions, and with programs and opportunities for people to seek help. So that would be a public database with information, and to actually start to collect the data.
Mm-hmm. So with New York State being the first state to make World FTD Awareness Week an official part of its calendar, what would you advise? What would your advice be to advocates in other states who may want to make this a reality in their own state? I'm listening from California. I'd like to.
Every state, I think, should do this, right? We match state resolutions and state awareness days with everything. And so bringing more attention at the state level is, I think, critical, because a lot of people, like you said, found our post about it, that we were sharing it out. A lot of people follow their local legislators. And so finding someone within, I'll use California, within the California legislature who would sponsor this, who would write the resolution, they can copy ours, but who would sponsor that to introduce it, is a great start. So, I believe that there are champions across the state in every legislature who would do this. And it's just the resolution itself is a great start.
When we look at education, we look at a need for health professionals, providers, and the general public to understand what FTD is and how to provide whatever support, care, management, and other resources are possible. Do you have perspective on that in your state of New York? And where do you hope we can get that to in the years ahead on a national level?
We need more information. And so the bill that we've introduced for next year that will collect really that first level of data, I think, is a really important start. We also, within that bill, define for the first time in state law what FTD is. And what dementia is, but specifically FTD. And so that will be really a formal entry into recognizing from the state level that this is a disease that we need to be tracking, that we need to be caring about, and we need to be doing more about. So being able to direct the Department of Health to engage every local hospital and every hospital system in telling them that we care, the state of New York, care about FTD diagnoses. So when you diagnose someone with frontotemporal degeneration, let us know, because we're tracking it and we're thinking about it. That alone, for many doctors who don't know what it is, because there's a lot of both confusion and just lack of awareness within the medical community. So for those who don't know, if they're seeing that the state cares about this bill, or not about the bill, but that the state cares about this disease, they'll start to educate themselves on it even more, because also now they have to, because if they're diagnosing someone, if they found it, we want to know, they have to tell us. I think that's an important place that will help to really socialize within both the medical community and the healthcare community that this is something that we need to do a lot more on. There are also two bills that exist within our legislature about different types of dementias. One of them talks about doing a public information campaign about programs that are available for help and support. And one of them is about treatments. what we find often.
Sorry, do you mean like dementia as a whole?
Well, so what we find generally is that they're targeted to Alzheimer's, and they'll title it with Alzheimer's and other dementias. But really, the takeaway for most people is Alzheimer's. So we're actually working to socialize with our colleagues that Alzheimer's is important. The research around Alzheimer's is critical, and that disease is absolutely horrific as well. But it does get all of the attention. It gets much of the funding. And when you think about dementia, you think Alzheimer's. And we have to start to have the conversation that there are many other dementias outside of just Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that I'm working with my colleagues on, is to, instead of maybe naming Alzheimer's specifically, we can talk about all dementias, and making sure that if we are calling them out specifically, that FTD is in that list, because it has to be.
Yeah, because all different dementias present differently. The symptoms are different. One size does not fit all. Alzheimer's is not FTD. FTD is not Alzheimer's. It's very different. So that is so needed within the space. Senator, what has it been like for you to share your family's story? And what advice do you have for the viewers today who may be wondering why their own FTD story matters, whether to legislators or to others?
Sharing our story was, we thought, really important to raise awareness. It also proved to be really important for us, because as soon as we did, we could talk about it. Yes. We found people to be able to talk with, but we could talk about it. And that was just, honestly, really such a gift to be open about it. And,
just that weight, to lift the weight.
Exactly.
Breathe. Yes.
Exactly. And so many people don't, it becomes embarrassing. People don't want to talk about dementias. They don't want to talk about what their families are dealing with. They want to keep it close. And we struggled with that. Similarly, I think with you, we want people to remember my dad for who he was. We want people to remember him at the height of what he was doing, not just for New York, but for the country, and for the eloquent, incredible speeches he would give, for the work that he did, for the collaboration that he brought, and for the trust in government that he restored for so many people. But as soon as you acknowledge that something else is going on, the attention shifts to that. And we grappled with, is it helpful? Is it going to hurt his legacy? What do we do? And we realized that he had spent his whole life trying to do good for other people, that he would want to share his story to continue to do good for other people. And so that gave us a lot of confidence to be public and to talk about it. And it also gave the space for other people to want to talk about their experiences. And we have to destigmatize anything that has to do with dementias. We have to destigmatize it, and we have to show people that this is part of life. It's horrible and it's unfortunate, but this is what we are all going through in some capacity. And sharing your story, whether your partner, your family member, your friend is a public figure, or they're an incredible neighbor with a great group of friends who's important to their community, sharing that story can be transformative for people. We know it. 2 years ago, we held, during FTD Awareness Week, we did a Facebook Live where we partnered with AFTD and did a Q&A, brought some information as it was an awareness push. I talked about my story and our family's story, and we had people from AFTD on to talk about the disease and to educate people. We had people tuning in from across the country. State Senator for New York, people from all over the country joined our Zoom. They asked questions. They found a place to be able to talk about their story, and found other people in the chat to be able to engage with and see that they're going through it too. it's so important.
Like,
So we plan to do more of those, but it's, I would say to everybody, we've got to talk about it. We've got to support the legislation that's out there, encourage your representatives at a county level, at a state level, at a federal level to introduce awareness resolutions, to look at bills that are being introduced in other states, like what we're doing here in New York, and continue to increase both the awareness and the information that we have, because the more information we have, the sooner we can find some real answers.
I am so moved and inspired by you. Thank you so much. I have nothing else to add. So what I am going to do is get into our CTAs for the day. Tell others about why you're passionate about FTD education and awareness on social media. If you visit the AFTD.org, that is linked at the bottom of this video, you'll find messaging and graphics you can download and share. Share AFTD's diagnostic checklists for behavioral variant FTD and for primary progressive aphasia in your social networks to help the public and families facing symptoms to learn more about this disease. These resources are also now available in Spanish, French, Dutch, and Italian. This is linked at the bottom of this video. If you haven't already, we encourage you to change your profile picture on social media. Just visit the link below and follow the instructions to show the world you care about FTD. Senator Hinchey, thank you for your service. Oh boy, I'm going to start crying. Thank you for bringing FTD awareness into our government at a state and national level. Thank you for all that you are doing within this space, because it truly makes such a difference. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing and the change that you have brought to the awareness and the education on FTD. It's invaluable, and we're in a better place today because of your advocacy. So thank you very much.